Well, my education includes master's and doctorate in biology from University of California, Santa Barbara. I followed that up with postdoctoral work with the Smithsonian Institution in Florida, one of their field stations in Florida, but also had the opportunity to work at the museum as one of their biologists. And our main focus was to look at resources in deep reefs using submersibles, manned submersibles. And I spent about 2.5 years doing that. It was more or less a pure research approach. We did quite a bit of good work on artificial reefs as well. Looked at various sunken wrecks and deep reefs as well. Nobody had ever really looked at the biological diversity on deep reefs around the Bahamas and around the Keys in Florida. So we did a great deal of work there. We also became involved in developing the Pennycamp Reef State Park and aiding in the re-establishment of coral and things like that there in that location. So, and after that, I decided I'd like to do a little more practical applied work and returned to Santa Barbara and began a consulting company, Ecomar Incorporated. And our main thrust in the first few years was to conduct environmental field surveys, basically ocean sampling and environmental surveys that were related to either human activity in general, urban areas and outfalls and general pollution related to, or environmental concerns related to urban expansion along the coastline. And then also worked with oil industry and oil industry development in California in its early stages. We did a great number of what were termed biological surveys or block clearing surveys using ROVs, divers, and various technology available at the time, and included manned submersibles as well on the California coast for a number of operators as they began to explore leases in that area. This was in the late 70s and went on into the early 80s. From there, we continued that work, but we did a study for Shell Oil Company, actually a consortium of operators, but Shell was the major impetus behind the study. And it required that we examine the marine growth on a wide variety of platforms in Southern California. And that study went on for about 2.5 years, and we developed a very good idea of how the marine growth developed on platforms. There was a concern in California, as there is in the North Sea. It's not so much a problem in the Gulf, but the marine growth becomes extremely thick, and the structural integrity of the platform over time begins to become a concern, both in currents and high wave conditions. We found in our study, for example, that the radial growth on a platform member could be increased by up to 3 feet. And so that represents over 6 feet of diameter increase. They placed conductors, for example, on most of the platforms 6 feet apart. Well, this meant that an entire row of conductors could potentially grow together and represent a seawall that would be hammered on by waves and things. And structurally, that weight-wise as well, that became a real concern. So we conducted the study in order to give them an idea of how this developed and if there were any ways that it might be controlled. And we looked at various substrates, for example, putting things onto the conductors that might, or onto the structure itself that might inhibit that kind of growth accumulation. We looked at the succession of the animal community on the platform to see if there were some stages that might be more susceptible to removal. What most operators were doing at the time was, when this growth accumulated to what they thought might be dangerous, or it just got to the point where they should run some sort of maintenance operation and remove the growth, they were spending quite a bit of money just hiring commercial firms to remove it. So they were looking at ways to reduce those costs and ways to plan for building new structures in the Southern California area.